I wasn't sure that the batteries on my mic were going to hold out. And so I just went around and got some new batteries. I'm telling you that because when I was outside, you guys sounded so good. You know, through the windows, I can hear you. It's different than in here. You know what I mean? There's some birds going on out there. There's all the nature sounds, very quiet, very peaceful. But then this group coming through the windows, and you sound good. You sound really good. It's good to hear. It's just a different way to worship. You know what I mean? I don't know if you want to bring a lawn chair and sit outside next week, but it's a different way to worship. So that was nice. Let's do this as we start together, okay? I could actually use a volunteer. I'm going to need several volunteers today. I need some volunteers to help me today. And so I'm looking for volunteers. If you're interested in helping me, raise your hand. You need to be under the age of 13 to be able to help me. If you're interested in helping me, I need a volunteer. It's under the age of 13. I have two. Whose birthday's next? I have two right here. I don't know that's a coercion. Whose birthday's next? I need the next birthday. Emmy, who's next? Who's close? I don't know whose birthday's next. Who's the closest birthday? When is it? November. Anybody before November? Come on, Emmy, you're it. You guys aren't no birthdays, right? Yet? Okay. November's the closest one coming next, right? That's how I'm going with it. Let's go, Emmy. Come on. Me and you. I'm going to do like I normally do, okay? You a Lego person?
Yes.
Mario Kart? Mm-hmm. Everything you need is right there. I'm going to give them an introduction here, and you get busy building, okay? There's the picture. That's it, right there. Don't bother about the details here, kid. These are the Legos. This is the picture. See that right there? Good luck. You got it. You got it, okay? Now, the rest of you, take your Bibles, turn with me to Ephesians chapter 6. Today we'll be in Ephesians chapter 6. And if you have not been with us over the last few weeks, I don't usually torture children, but at the beginning of the message, we have been talking about, we've been doing a series on the family. And so we've been introducing that series. And our series we're calling The House the Lord Builds, because we are taking our verse, Psalm 127 and verse 1, we're kind of building the thought around this verse that says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And so we want the Lord building our houses. As we're raising families, as we're thinking about our families, seeing not only our children grow up, but our grandchildren grow up and developing families, we want the Lord to be the center of that, and we want the Lord to be building the house. And so we have looked at a lot of messages having to do with marriage, and that's been the focus of a lot of our, over the last few weeks. But today we're going to shift, and we're going to take this series and turn it a little bit toward the relationship between parents and children. And so that's where we are today, where we're going to read. And I'm sorry, did I tell you Ephesians chapter 4? We're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6. I think I was in Ephesians chapter 4 Wednesday night and still had my marker there. So Ephesians chapter 6 is where we're going to be in just a little bit. And the title of today's message is Obedience and Nurture. That's what we're going to look at today, okay? So, you have not put one piece together.
I've got this. But I don't know what to do because I don't have a book.
You're exactly right. You don't have a book. But here, this is the whole reason I brought you up here, okay? Just to torture you for just a few minutes. Because every one of us know what we want our families to look like. We know what they ought to look like, right? If we've grown up in a Christian home, we have an idea of what, when we think about our families and our children, we have an idea. And many people try to get there, even people that are not necessarily believers, but have an idea of what a family should look like. They're trying to build their family, but what's the problem?
They don't have a book.
No instructions, no book. And God has given us that. God has given us that. It would be really helpful if you had this instruction. Yes. Which I also tore those pieces apart and put them all in one bowl. But if you are interested We do not have time for you to finish this right now, but if you're interested, I will leave all this up here. After church, you come up here. There's a Ziploc bag in there. You can pour these into that. There's an instruction book, and that's yours. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Give her a hand. Good job. The Lord has given us an instruction booklet. He has shown us what He wants from us. He has told us, this is the world I created. This is how I designed you to live. And parents, this is the instruction manual for how to raise your children. Are there tons of explicit parental advice in this text? Maybe not explicit, but the principles that are there are definitely helping us to know what to do when it comes to raising our children, right? Children, over and over and over again, there are instructions in this word for you to obey your parents. And so today, as we think about following God's design, let's read the first 4 verses of Ephesians chapter 6. Let's read those together, and then we'll walk through them, okay? So Ephesians 6 and verse 1 says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother." This is the first commandment with a promise, "that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Here's what we're going to do with the message today. This text, I think, has 2 sermons in it. So I'm going to preach 2 sermons today. I have 2 little outlines. I've got a children's sermon. There's a message for children. There's a message for parents. And so I'm going to walk through both of those outlines today. And let's look at those instructions where children, the instructions are about obedience. Parents, the instructions are about nurture. Let's do this together. Children, here's your sermon. Walking in obedience would be the title of this sermon. That's our first point for today. Walking in obedience would be the title of the message. And those first few verses are giving a word to children. Notice that first in that text, there's a requirement given to children. There's a requirement. There's a command. The command is, children, obey your parents. Obey your parents in the Lord. You'll see on down in verse number 2, I guess, it tells us that we should honor our fathers and our mothers. Children, you're to obey your parents. You look without complaint. You know, it's one thing to obey your parents and do what they say, but it's another thing to do it while you're doing that, right? To follow. We know that when parents ask us to do a thing, that we're supposed to do that. The text says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. And so it's giving kind of a caveat that if your parents are asking you to do things that ultimately, in all of these passages of submission, it's telling us that our main allegiance is to God. And so if there was the instance where parents, asking you to do something that's not in the Lord, as long as your parents are following Christ in that way, as long as your parents are asking you to do things that are not in direct conflict with God and His Word, that command is given for children to obey. Now, here's the thing. As I'm saying that, you may say as a child, okay, yeah, David, I know, but. Every single person in this room has been disobedient to their parents. Anybody not been? I mean, well, aside from me, Anybody else, right? We've all been disobedient to our parents. And here's the thing that you need to remember. You will hear people rant and rave about, homosexuality, about murder. They'll talk about all these things that are they'll like they're categorizing sin. But when Romans 1 talks about the sinfulness of man, it takes murder, homosexuality, slander, anger, bitterness, and it ranks it right up there with being disobedient to your parents. That also makes the list in Romans 1. That means that for every one of us, when it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, I believe it's telling us something about the instructions, that our ultimate obedience is to the Lord. But it's also telling us that you and I should be, that by obeying, it's an act of worship to God when we obey our parents in the Lord. It's disobedient to parents is sinfulness to God. That's what Romans chapter 1 says. And so as these commands are given to us, this requirement is just reminding us that all of us, every person in the room has been disobedient to our parents, and every person in the room needs the forgiveness of Jesus because every one of us has a rebellious heart, and it's Jesus that died on the cross for sinners like me and you who disobey God. All of us have been disobedient to our parents, but the command is that we would have this obedience to the Lord, that children, as you learn how to be obedient to your parents, you're also learning how to be obedient to the Lord. And I believe it helps you. If a child can learn to be obedient to their parents, I believe that more readily they will be able to be obedient to the Lord. Because, as adults, that feeling of rebellion, I don't want to, also happens as adults. When God puts his finger on a place in our heart and he says, I want you to do this. And we stomp our foot and we pitch a temper tantrum because we don't want to. But as we're growing in Christ-likeness, we're also growing in obedience, and he's helping us with that. Notice there's two commands here. The command in verse 1 is obey your parents in the Lord. The second command in verse 2, the second requirement is to honor your father and mother. And I don't believe honor and obedience are the same thing. I said a while ago, you can be obedient while still not honoring. Right? Obedience is the thing that you're doing. If your mom asks you to take out the trash and you take out the trash, no matter whether you want to or not, you take out the trash, you're being obedient, right? But the spirit in which you take out the trash is the honor. That's the difference. That's what it means to honor. And I also think this is pretty important because, listen, they're still my parents, but I don't know that I necessarily obey Neil and Kathy Brown anymore. For instance, this really happens with your kids. I can think about this very clearly. Joseph, I don't know if you remember this, but Joseph had eaten candy. Pop has candy jars around at their house, and he had eaten candy. And at some point, I put a stop, and I said, Joseph, you don't need any more candy. No more candy. It was very clear. Everybody heard this command, right? And then I found my dad in the kitchen with Joseph sneaking him a piece of candy. And I got onto him. Look, you're my daddy, but you ain't his daddy. I'm his daddy. And I said, no more candy, right? Look, I don't necessarily obey Neil and Kathy Brown anymore, but I'm to honor them for life. Honor is for life, right? You may say I'm a grown person, I'm whatever else I'm doing, and okay. Obedience to parents when we're young helps us develop honor, which is lifelong. It's the way that we show care for our parents as they age and as they're older. When we're adults, if we've learned to be obedient and to honor by just simply not rolling our eyes when we're asked to take out the trash, it also breeds in us this honor that helps care for parents as they age and are not able to do that for themselves. And so just the idea of honor is something that's lifelong. Children, the requirement is obey and honor, but look at the reason. There's also a reason in this text as to why you should do that. It's in verse 1, and it's a very simple reason. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's just the right thing to do. We're going to talk about in just a minute the fact that there are benefits from this. But even if there were no benefits from doing the thing that your parents were asking you to do, it's just right to do that. When you look at this text, we have looked already in this text we are in Ephesians 6 today, but in a previous week, you may remember we were in Ephesians chapter 5, and it's talking about these relationships. On Wednesday night, we were in Ephesians chapter 4, and it's all of this submission, how we submit to each other as Christians, how we have unity together. That's back in 4. How we have unity together as Christians because we submit to one another. And then he gives some specific examples, and he starts talking about the relationship between husbands and wives and how there's a creative order, right? We've talked about that over several weeks and how there's just an order in the home. And husbands are to love wives, wives are to submit and respect husbands. And then he goes into this master and servant picture in the next text at the end, just in the very next few verses in chapter 6. And here in these first few verses, he's dealing with this submission between parents and children. It flows through these chapters here, through 4, 5, 6. There's this creative order and the design that God has for the world, and we operate in that. That's the right thing to do. Children, why should you obey your parents? Because I said so. No, because it's right. Obey your children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's just the right thing to do. It follows God's creative order. There is a requirement here, and there's a reason here to obey, but I want you to see finally there's a reward in this. The end of verse 2, it tells us that we do this, and it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Then notice what it does in verse 2. It quotes the Ten Commandments. He goes back, and my translation even has quotes around it, reminding us that we're going back to Exodus 20, honor your father and mother, and then it's giving us this little note. This is the first commandment with a promise, and then it gives us in verse 3 the promise, and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. Now listen, you may have heard this. If you obey your parents, you'll live a long time. You'll have old age. You'll live to old age. And that's not what the text is really saying. The command is given to the children of Israel before they go into the promised land. And there's a connection to the land. It's not that your days will be long on the earth. That's sometimes how that we've translated that. But the real issue is that your days may be long in the land. He's saying when you go into the land, if children disobey parents, the social order is messed up. Children who don't learn to obey parents as children grow up to be adults who don't respect authority, and your culture breaks down. If you don't want to see your culture break down, this is the command: honor your father and mother. That's kind of the gist of the text, right? It's not the idea that you'll necessarily have a long life, right? It doesn't mean that people who die at a young age have been disobedient to their parents. Don't draw the wrong conclusions from those verses. What it's telling us is, notice the first part of that's important too. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well for you. If you obey your parents, let's back up. Let me phrase it another way. How many of us can think about heartache, pain, tragedy that would have been avoided if we would have obeyed our parents? Can you think about anything where things went awry, but if you had done what your parents had told you to do, it wouldn't have gone that way? Most of the time, our parents have our best interests at heart. Most of the time, especially just knowing, looking around, most of us were raised in a Christian home. Even if you weren't a family that went to church, you probably had some echoes of Christian morals and principles in your home, and your parents were leading you and guiding you in a way that it will go well for you. If you obey your parents, most likely things are going to go better for you than if you disobey them. And then he's saying something about culture when he gets to that your days will be long in the land. And I think that we can look around and see the effects in our culture of what happens when people do not obey their parents. You can just see what happens when a culture goes that direction. God always ties obedience to flourishing, and that's what he does in this text. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, because this is right. And by doing so, there are good benefits for your life and for all of society, for our whole culture, when children obey parents. Let's move on to a parent's outline, right? Children are supposed to be walking in obedience, but parents are supposed to be nurturing with grace. When you get to verse 4, there's a message for parents. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I've been studying this week. You'll notice that there are 4 verses that we read. 3 of them are devoted to children. 1 of them is devoted to parents. Just a second ago, I said we've seen this outline for children. Let's see this outline for parents. And Karen Thompson went, and I know that feeling. Because even though there's just 1 verse devoted to parents, it's really hard to not see that verse. Oh, it hurts, doesn't it? It hits and it hurts and it convicts. Parents, let's read the message. We're going to walk through the message for parents. And you'll notice verse 4 begins with a caution. If you're going to nurture with grace, you need to heed the caution that's given in this verse. Notice it starts in verse 4 by saying, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger." Now, it uses the word fathers. It begins with that word fathers, but this is a very general term, and I believe it refers to both parents, okay? The same way you may think about how we might talk about mankind, and we're not just talking about men, right? When it says fathers, I believe it's talking about both parents, because in the previous verses, it's told us to, verse 1, children, obey your parents. That would be mom and dad. In verse 2, it tells us to honor your father and your mother. So we can assume that word that's there, which is translated as fathers, is the idea of parents. And when it talks about that, it tells us that you and I should not provoke our children to anger. In other words, we should be offering instruction and we should be desiring obedience in a way that makes it edible for our children. It makes it easy for our children to want to obey. See, the problem here is that when you read that, you think about, well, I don't think I provoke my children to anger. David, what does that even mean? How does one provoke their children to anger? Because we know that if you just look at the rest of the text, we think about the parent's role is guiding, giving instruction, and children obeying that. But the text is telling us that the same way a child can obey and not honor, parents can give discipline and instruction and it not be in the right tone. It not be with the right attitude. That's hard, isn't it? Any parents convicted by that one? Oh, I love your honesty, Angie. I love it. How does one provoke their children to anger? I overheard a parent the other day speaking to two children. They did not know I was listening. It wasn't here at church, let me say that. First of all, the story I'm fixing to tell, let me say it was not here at church. The parents did not know that I was listening. But if you would have just heard what they were saying to those children, you would have not thought that they were talking to two children under 10 years old. You would have thought that they were a Marine drill sergeant. Do you think that kind of a mouth like a sailor toward these small children? Do you think that the tone, like you're ready to end their life, mixed with all of that? Do you think that is helping your children? Or might it be provoking your children to anger? What if I'm constantly comparing my children to other people? Boy, why can't you be more like so-and-so over there? Look, do you see them? Which is very easy to do, isn't it? Like the mindset behind that is, this is a characteristic that your weekend, I would like to see this be stronger in you. Look at that person over there. This is a strength for them. Like as a parent, that's very natural to fall into. But constant comparison will provoke your children to anger. What if I decide that I want my children to follow my goals instead of following theirs? And I'm constantly pressuring them to do the things that I want them to do rather than doing the things that they have set for them, than God has willed for them. Do you think that might provoke our children to anger? What if I never, ever express approval to my children or show affection to my children? Do you think that might be a way that we might provoke our children to anger? What if you discipline one way today and you discipline another way tomorrow? And this time they do that thing, you let it go and you don't even say anything about it because you're tired and it's been a long day and you let it go. But then the next time you do that, when you've got a little vim and vigor about you, you fly off the handle and you're in big time trouble. And a child does not know when or what response they're going to get out of mom or dad because they don't know what the standard is. Do you think that might provoke anger in our children? You see, those are not just words on a page. Those are things that we are living through every single day. When we read that verse, don't just zip past that and say, well, you know, I don't cuss my kids out in the Walmart parking lot, so I'm doing pretty good. But am I provoking them to anger? Parents, don't provoke your children to anger. We don't want to exasperate our children. We don't want to make them angry. The idea is that we want them to desire to obey. And so look at the next part of this text. It gives the first point for our parents would be that there's a caution in this verse. But then you'll also see there's a charge in this verse. Like a command, but it's a charge for you to do this thing. Fathers, don't provoke your children to anger, but bring them up. I want to stop right there just for our purposes, okay? But bring them up. You can finish the rest of the sentence in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That's going to be our third point in a minute. But notice the bring them up part. That conveys intention to me, right? If you're bringing your children up, then that means that you're nurturing them with leadership, that you're thinking about what the outcome is going to be, that one day these young men are going to leave my home. What kind of young men will they be when they leave? Because in some ways it's already over, you know? Like in some ways, like Joseph lives at home with us. Joseph lives at our house. But Joseph's very independent, doing his own thing, right? He's doing his own thing. He doesn't need us to get him around. He's doing adult things. In some ways, it's already over, right? What kind of young men, if I think about the end result of that, parents, what kind of children do I want to send out into the world as adults? And then to recognize that the decisions that I'm making now, every single day, are steering that ship toward its course. That's a sobering thought. And you know what's even more like convicting? Well, I mean, it's concerning. Let me start off this way. You may tell what's concerning about that to me is that there are so many people who are living their lives, raising their children, and they are not consulting any kind of instruction book whatsoever, certainly not the one that they should be. They're just letting it happen. There are tons of people that take no intention in raising their children. There's nothing intentional about it. The time is just passing, and they are never thinking about what that child is going to be like when they're out into adulthood. If they do think about it, they think about it very little. And then you know what's convicting for me? How many days have passed on my watch that I haven't done with intention what I should have done? There are many of you in this room that would say, David, you're right about that. My children came and went, and it happened before I even really realized. If you're a parent with children in the room with intention, bring them up. That means that you have thought about who your children are. You have taken the best means that you know how to get them to that place, to see them not just grow physically, right? Not just putting a roof over their head and clothes and all those things, but you're seeing your child grow in every way. You're nurturing them. You're bringing them up emotionally, spiritually, socially, every single way, right? You know, I think it's in Luke 2:52 when it talks about the fact that Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and in favor with men. What a well-rounded person. And all of our children, we should be nurturing in that way. That our children are growing in wisdom and in stature physically. They're growing in favor with the Lord and in favor with men. What a great little model, to take. With intention, we should be bringing them up. You'll see that there's a caution. What's interesting is the caution comes before if I was writing this, I would give the instruction first. This is what you do, right? Do it with intention, and this is how you do it, right? Don't provoke them to anger, but it's right the opposite in the verse. It starts with a caution, then a charge, then it gives the content. When you're raising them up, the charge is to raise them up, to bring them up, and now it's telling you the content that you use to bring them up. In fact, I would say that if this is the root of our content, then it will change that first part and it will be much easier to avoid provoking our children to anger. You see, parents, it's important that you provide constructive correction or discipline. And the passage gives two things. It says that we bring them up in the discipline of the Lord, and we bring them up in the instruction of the Lord. And both are really important. You know, in this text, or just throughout Scripture, this text is proving something that we already see played out in other places, right? When you look back to Scripture, my mind immediately goes to someone like Eli, someone like Samuel, who didn't bring up their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and you see the results, right? When you think about Samuel was somebody who, when you look at what was happening with him, Samuel's sons were not who they should have been. And because of a lack of discipline, because of a lack of instruction when they were young, as adults, those men did not do what they should have done, right? The opposite of this verse can be seen when you look in our culture. If it says that we should be raising our children in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord, that's not what's happening around us. In fact, one of the commentators I was reading this week said that our culture has rewritten this verse, parents, obey your children, for this will keep them happy and bring peace to the home, right? And you just have to take one trip to Walmart to see that, right? We talked about it before, but parents, if your content is right, then there won't be inconsistency in your discipline, because there's going to be one standard, and we're going to follow that standard. I think I've told you before, but you know, I had mentioned it the other day, I think in Sunday school, and somebody had not heard me say that, and made an impression on them, but it made an impression on me. My dad, had this rule when we were growing up. It was basically like one rule, and the rule was like, if you see me smoke it or drink it or dip it or watch it or do it, it's okay for you to. That was the rule. What he was saying by that is, I'm going to set the standard for this. He was also saying, this is not acceptable behavior for you, because it's not acceptable behavior for anybody. He was throwing something out there, and he was saying that it's not going to be inconsistent. And I can say my dad, by and large, my dad's not perfect, but my dad, by and large, did that, right? I hope, and I don't know that I've done as good a job with my boys as he did with me in that regard, right? In telling them the same thing. I don't know that I have pulled that off as gracefully as he did. When the passage tells us that it's discipline and instruction, we often think about discipline as being punitive, that it's punishment. I discipline you because you've done wrong. But discipline is more the idea of rigor, of structure, of it being the same, which is great for especially small children. They need that rigor and structure. And that in and of itself is the instruction. Through that, you're instructing. And discipline is not being mean. Think about parents. If you want to know how to discipline your children, think about how God disciplines us. God does not discipline us in order to be mean to us. Why does God discipline his children? He loves them, and he's trying to steer us back to where we ought to be. And so, if we're disciplining our children just to punish them so that we'll feel better, that might provoke our children to anger. But if the mindset in discipline is, I'm going to bring them back to the way that they ought to go, I'm going to bring them to a place where they're back on the right track. That is how he is shaping us. When you think about all that children are doing, parents, listen, this text is telling you that you should discipline your children and instruct your children. But I'm just going to tell you, you are doing that whether you know it or not. Your children are watching you, and you are instructing them in something. You are teaching them something. The question is, what is it? What is the content that's a part of your parenting? The truth is that children do learn they do learn by imitation, don't they? Think about little kids playing house or whatever, there's a little kitchen. And how do little girls act in that little play kitchen? Well, they act in that play kitchen like they've seen adults act. They play act. And it's learning. It's learning how to get through life. It's learning how to do, and they're learning that. Listen, parents, they're watching you, and they're learning by what you're doing, probably more than what you're saying. Listen, you say, David, I'm glad you hadn't hit on me because my kids are grown and I'm done with it. Listen to me. Listen to me, adults whose kids are grown. Did you know that what children think about church is what they see in this one? The same way that they mimic mom and dad, they also are looking at the way we are as a church. That's everybody in the room. They're paying attention. They're noting what that looks like. The same way that when we think about that with parents and children, we think about, we think about that maybe they lose their temper because they see us lose our temper. We think about they say a wordy dirt because we said a wordy dirt, Or we may think about it in those terms. But, in a much larger scope, like they think about church, they'll think about marriage. What they see in your marriage is what they're going to think marriage is. Don't punish that poor future child's spouse, that child's future spouse, by teaching them all the wrong things about marriage, right? What they see in us. If we want them to be hardworking, they should see someone hardworking. If we want them to be people of integrity, they should see someone of integrity. If we want them to be forgiving and compassionate, they should see someone who's forgiving and compassionate. Whatever they see, whatever we feed is what they're going to act out. Me and you may be ashamed of what they see in us. And the truth is that when you go home, when you go home, you become who you really are. When you get home and you relax, your children see you in that place, right? But what they're seeing is who you really are. It's really hard to fake it at home. And so what our children should be seeing more than anything is zero separation between who we are in public and who we are when we're at our worst. That's the ideal. That there's no separation between those things. You and I may be ashamed of what our children see in us, but another thing that you shouldn't hide from your children, another thing your children should see in you all the time, is they should see that you know that you need grace. Don't hide your failures from your kids. It's okay. If you go off on your child, it's okay to tell them that you're sorry. If you wrong your child, tell them that you're sorry. Tell them that you're wrong. Let them know that, look, I'm trying to do this, but I'm not doing everything right. And this is one place where I messed up. And I'm going to try to do better, but I need you to try to do better too. Right? And that, listen, that's showing your children that all of us, if your children see you mess up and then they see you ask forgiveness, but then they also see you go to Him for grace, what is that teaching them to do when they mess up? Ask for forgiveness, you're going to Him for grace, right? And what we're trusting is that He has shown us His love by dying on the cross for us, and all of us are in need of grace. And so the content, the discipline and the instruction is surrounded by what we find in this word, a word that tells us that God loves us and He sent His Son for me and you. Which leads us to our third point. There's a message for parents and a message for children. Children to walk in obedience, parents to nurture with grace. But all of this is to be grounded in the Lord. Did you notice that both commands are tied together by in the Lord? The verse begins by telling us, children, obey your parents in the Lord. The verse ends by saying that we should bring up our children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Both verses are rooted in the Lord. And if that's the case, if both of these are commands and obedience to God is this form of worship, then that means that children, when you're obedient to your parents, that's a form of worship. That means parents, when you nurture your children with grace, that's worship. It's glorifying God and living in his design. And I believe that Jesus is the perfect example of this, walking in obedience, and he's the one who shows us grace. And so if we're looking for instructions on that, we don't need to look any further than Jesus. Because these are God's words for us, and they are given to us for our benefit. Those instructions in this text today are for our good. Even though they may hurt because they're convicting, they help us. Is Gus still with us? Easton and Gus, come here. Oh, well, yeah. Certainly we want it to smell good up here, so do that for sure. Y'all look matched. Y'all got ready for this. Tag team this action. You right there. You come over here with me. Hold that. You right here. Just stand right here. Now here's your job. You ready? We're just going to squirt that bottle. Now, not like this. I mean, any goober could do that. That's not what I'm looking for, okay? We're going to do this right here, okay? Let's see if we can do this where it hits Gus. It's a pretty powerful bottle. Gus, you might have to back up. Hit him. See if you can hit him. Get a good stream going. Not like that. Up. You got to go up. It's got to be, yes, I want that right there. Back up a little bit. You getting him? You getting wet? Listen. This is just a little squirt bottle, but this is an illustration. The storms of life are always going to come. Keep going. We want him good and soaked. The storms of life are going to come. They're going to come. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? You think you need this? Here you go. Put this up. Let's see what this does. We're not superstitious, so we're going to give it a go. I think we are. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. Keep going. The storms of life are always going to come. They're always going to come. They're like constantly. It's going to be constantly one thing. And you think your kids are out of that stage, and guess what? There's going to be a new stage. And you think your kids are grown and gone and everything's going to be perfect for them? Nope. Storms are still going to keep right on coming, right? Here's the thing. When we follow God's instructions, it is like this umbrella. When we obey our parents' instructions, who are following the Lord, it puts us under this umbrella. And if it will go well with you to be under this umbrella, right, to miss out on those storms, wouldn't we do that? That's good. We might have to clean up. I might have to get a mop, The storms of life are going to come. The question is, are you resting under the umbrella of God's commands? Are you doing that as a parent? Children, are you resting under the commands of your parents who know the storms of life, who have walked those places before and are trying to put up this umbrella over you to give you some shelter so that it will go well with you? I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. I'm going to ask you guys to go sit down, and I'm going to get these guys to come as we get ready to have an hymn of invitation. And what I would like for you to do this morning is, I know that we're here and all of us have various roles, different things going. Some of us are parents, some of us are children. We all have different family relationships where some of you in the room, your children are grown and you may not feel like this message has a lot to do with you. But I think that all of us know what it means to be obedient to the Lord is to come under the umbrella of His grace and to experience the benefits of obedience. Do you know what? Children should obey parents because it's right. But you know why? Do you know why all of us should obey the Lord? Because it's right. Even if there was no benefit in it at all. In fact, some people in Scripture, Daniel was obedient and he went to the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were obedient and they went to the furnace. Paul was obedient and he went to prison. John the Baptist was obedient and he lost his head. You understand that even if there's no reward, it's the right thing to do to obey the Lord. And maybe you're here this morning and your life is not lived in obedience. And this morning you would come and you would say, Lord, I want to lean on you. Lord, I want to follow you. Maybe children in the room, something that I specifically said this morning, you need to come and you need to ask forgiveness and you need to do a better job of obeying your parents. You need to do a job to recognize that the way that you obey your parents is the way that you will obey the Lord. And maybe this morning you want to come and you want to say, Lord, I'm going to walk with you, and Lord, I need your help. And Lord, I know this week I'm going to have trouble obeying, and Lord, I'm going to need your help.